Look, I'm giving you a pass this time, okay? Just come back. I'll look the other way, just for now. What is this guy going on about? He must be clueless. Time to give him a dose of harsh reality. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. Been married to my husband Mason for a year now. We met at a party, a casual get-together hosted by a friend. We hit it off, started dating like any other couple, and eventually tied the knot. We're not getting any younger after all. Mason's not the most exciting guy, but he brings a sense of peace. That's why I thought we'd make it till the end, till we're old and gray. We both work, so going hungry is not on the cards. Got married without overthinking. I handle most of the housework since we're both busy with our jobs. Mason never helps. He's either lounging around or heads out early, rarely spending time at home. But I never found housework to be a burden. My parents lived like this too. I accepted this as the kind of life a wife would have. I have a 9-to-5 job and I'm not overloaded with hobbies. Mason and I were never chatty to begin with. We both respected each other's space and it was never an issue. Life went on. One night, Mason came home late, presumably from drinking with coworkers, friends, who knows. I welcomed him. Mason, you're home late. Had a long night out, huh? Dinner's still there if you want it, but I guess you're not eating this late, are you? He turned around and said nothing, and walked into the living room, ignoring me. I sighed. Here we go again. Whenever Mason is in a bad mood, he gets very quiet. So I figured something at work or during his night out must have upset him. Best to let him be. I know better than to poke the bear when he's like this. I felt his presence from the living room, but shrugged it off and went to bed. He'll probably be back to his cheerful self by morning. It was the same old story. And I didn't give it a second thought. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Mason came into the kitchen. Good morning, I greeted him cheerfully. Mason glanced at me, grabbed some milk from the fridge, and left without a word. I was a bit surprised by his coldness. It wasn't like him. Seems like he's still in a bad mood. I never thought I'd see the day. I mused, aware that we were a family of strong, independent individuals. I hadn't made a point to talk to Mason, really. I decided to wait and see. So I continued prepping lunchboxes for both Mason and myself. However, things didn't go back to normal that easily. Mason remained distant the following night and the day after. At this point, I was genuinely concerned. Days turned into weeks and Mason continued to give me the silent treatment. I tried reaching out through WhatsApp and even left him notes, but he ignored it all. However, he'd eat the meals I prepared. I noticed the empty lunchbox in the sink, so I knew he ate the packed lunch. So I put a note in the cooler bag. I thought if he found a note while enjoying the lunch I made with love, he'd have to react. But that was another miss. Mason said nothing. Before I knew it, over a month had passed in this strange silence. I felt helpless. I had tried everything, but nothing worked. Then one evening, I took a drastic step. I deliberately didn't prepare dinner. Every evening, I made dinner when I got home. But what if I didn't? How would Mason, who's been ignoring me, react? I decided to find out. But when Mason came home, I pretended to be watching TV in the living room. Mason came into the living room and looked intently at the table where dinner usually waited, but tonight the table was empty. After looking at the barren table, Mason turned his gaze to me. Holding my breath, I waited for him to say something, but he walked out of the living room in complete silence. I heard the front door open and shut with a bang. I was stunned. Why am I being ignored like this? I had no idea why. I was left bewildered, sitting alone on the living room couch. The next morning, I woke up and went to the living room. Mason was already gone. Did he go to work already? Curious, I looked on the living room table and found a note. Reading the words on it, my eyes went wide. "Stop skipping out on your wifely duties," it read, scribbled hastily in a messy handwriting. Something inside me snapped. That's it. I'm done. Why do I have to keep pleasing Mason? Is this going to be my life forever? We were never a clingy couple, but this is just unacceptable. And there's no reason for him to do this, nor an opportunity for me to even ask about it. For the last month, the stifling silence in the house has been unbearable. I wrote next to Mason's scribble, I'm going back to my parents' house. I quickly packed up my things and went home. My sudden arrival did surprise my parents, but after I explained how Mason had been ignoring me for over a month without any apparent reason, they understood and welcomed me warmly. It felt good to be in an environment where I could have a normal conversation. For now, I decided to stay here and see how Mason reacts before deciding on my next steps. I didn't hear from Mason the day I left. Knowing him, he's probably assuming I'm just trying to make a point and will continue to ignore me. Well, let's see how long this lasts. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no call or message from Mason via WhatsApp or any other means. He didn't even bother to visit my parents' house. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. I had nearly forgotten about Mason altogether. Then, one day, as I was leaving my parents' house to go shopping, there he was. Mason, standing with a defiant and angry expression. I was shocked and froze in my tracks. Mason just glared at me, still not saying a word. Is this game still going on? It was almost laughable how silent Mason was. But then, in the next moment, he tried to walk into my parents' house without saying a word. Whoa, hold on there. I stopped him. Mason looked at me, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, but still silent. I warned. I said, don't just walk in. I will call the police. Finally, after more than 6 months, Mason spoke, a snide smile on his lips. Look, at you, getting all uppity with me? Since when do you get so high and mighty? Just because you're at your parents' house doesn't mean you can act like that, you know? I remember Mason being a bit rough around the edges, but not like this. Lost in thought, I was jolted back to reality when Mason suddenly erupted. What the hell are you thinking? You leave the house for half a year, enjoying yourself at your parents' home? Get a grip! Mason ranted on, then spread his arms out as if to say, I can't believe this. Look, I'll give you a break this time, right? Just come home, I'm willing to turn a blind eye, this time. Mason spoke so condescendingly. I calmly retorted, I think you're confused. You and I are strangers now, you know. Mason's face went blank, then turned beet red with rage. He started yelling again. What the hell are you saying? Did you lose your mind? We're married, aren't we? Stop messing around. His intense outburst silenced me for a moment, and he kept yelling, I'm saying I'll forgive you this time, so stop fooling around and pack your bags. At that moment, my own anger boiled over. He talks like he's doing me a favor by forgiving me, as if I've done something wrong. That infuriated me even more. Moreover, it seemed Mason had no clue what had happened in the last 6 months. Finally, I snapped at Mason, who was still yelling away. I received divorce papers from your mother, signed them, and already filed them with the court, so we're not married anymore, got it? We're strangers. Total strangers. Understand? I emphasized the word strangers, and Mason looked at me, his face drained of color. He seemed genuinely shocked. Here's what happened. A month after I moved back to my parents' home, my then mother-in-law, Helen, called me to a cafe near our house. We had never been close, and I hadn't seen her for a while. After brief pleasantries, she handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked, tilting my head. Open it. Even you will understand, she said. In response, I opened an envelope and pulled out the paper inside. It was a divorce petition, already signed and stamped by Mason. Confused, I looked at Helen. The eyes of his mother, who was glaring at me, were the same as Mason's, full of disdain. While putting the divorce petition back into the envelope, I asked his mother, So, Is this Mason's doing? I asked her. Did he say anything to you about this? Helen let out an exaggerated sigh before answering. Oh, yes, he said plenty. Would you like to hear? I smiled at her and replied, Yes, please go ahead. She launched into her story. According to her, Mason had been bad-mouthing me for a while now, saying that I was a useless and incompetent wife, who stopped doing any housework after we got married, that I quit my job and lazed around at home all day, and that whenever something didn't go my way, I would run back to my parents and act like a spoiled child. Helen's eyes never left mine as she spoke, and it was clear she believed every word of Mason's lies. There was no point in arguing with her, I thought. When she was done talking, Helen finally asked, So, what are you going to do? Not that I want to meddle, but you're being pretty awful, you know. By the time I walked out of that house, my mind was made up. I smiled and told her, if he wants a divorce, then that's what he'll get. Helen glared at me one last time, slapped some money on the table for her share, and walked out of the cafe. I went straight to my parents' house, signed the divorce papers, and submitted them to the court the very next day. While I was explaining all of this, Mason's face turned increasingly pale. It seemed he hadn't been informed by Helen at all, but honestly, I didn't care. After all, I had already entrusted Helen with the signed divorce papers. Mason must have had the same idea in mind, I figured. Once I finished telling my side, Mason blurted out in a panic, No, you've got it all wrong. I only filled out those divorce papers to keep my mom off my back. I never intended to submit them. They're invalid. Panicked or just confused, he started making no sense. And besides, you're the one who will suffer if we divorce, so let's go to the court right now and have them withdrawn. I gave Mason a cold stare, then tilted my head. Why would it be a problem for me if we got divorced? Mason suddenly grinned as if he had won. Think about your age. At your age with a divorce history, no one will want you. That's why I'm saying I'll take you back. This is for your benefit. You get it? I'm saying we can pretend the divorce never happened and you should be happy. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at his arrogance and delusional thinking. Listen, we're not kids. A divorce doesn't just get erased, and for the record, I'm already married to someone else. Mason's jaw dropped and he went silent. What? Really? Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm married to someone else. Mason, who had a look of disbelief, suddenly started making a fuss. That's a lie. You're just trying to look good, aren't you? You're making up stories to get me to go away, aren't you? You're really making a fool out of me, you know that? Such lies won't work. Well, if he wants to be a fool, that's his problem. As I was wondering how to explain to this idiot, a presence came from behind me and a man appeared at the entrance. The man looked at me and Mason alternately, looking confused. Mason, for his part, was surprised to see a stranger coming out of my parents' home and fell silent. When I looked at the man, he tilted his head and asked, Is something wrong? Feeling awkward, I smiled and turned to Mason. This is my husband, Noah. Noah greeted Mason with a slight skeptical nod. Mason took a step back and looked up at Noah. It made sense. Noah was a former national rugby player with an imposing physique. Overwhelmed by Noah's appearance, Mason suddenly started to make excuses. No, you've got it all wrong. My old boss told me, you've been married for about a year now and your wife might start to get a little uncomfortable. Better put her in her place. So I did. And guess what? Turns out he got dumped by his wife and kids. What a fool, right? I was just doing what he told me to do. I never wanted to do any of that stuff. You understand, right, Olivia? I looked at Mason with a gaze filled with disgust, fed up with his pathetic excuses. Mason looked puzzled, maybe because my reaction wasn't what he expected. Then Noah spoke up. Sorry, but could you leave immediately and never come back here? If you approach Olivia again, I'll call the police. As he said this, Noah firmly pushed Mason out of the doorway. Intimidated by Noah's force and determination, Mason fled the scene. For a while, we both remained wary, concerned that Mason might harbor a grudge and do something irrational. But days turned into weeks and we never heard from him again. One day, curiosity got the best of me, and I reached out to a mutual friend to inquire about Mason. We began by catching up on casual topics, but when I asked about Mason, our friend sighed and filled me in. Surprisingly, Mason had quit his job just a few days after showing up at my parents' house. The reason? Turns out Mason was always in agreement with his boss, who he trusted. When the boss harassed subordinates at work, it became a big issue in the company. As a result, the boss was resigned. Resigned being a euphemism. He was basically demoted to some remote mountainous area I'd never heard of. Apparently, Mason was expected to be transferred as well, but he quit out of pride. According to our friend, he's still jobless. He's been looking for work, but his arrogance has hindered his efforts. Even when recruiters offer him opportunities, he declines interviews. Furthermore, news of him quitting reached his mother, who then disowned him due to her own extreme personality. Finally, our friend said, "He blames everything on his old manager and just drowns his sorrows every day. At this rate, he'll ruin his health before he ever finds another job. It's a mess. I hope he finds a new spouse or something, though that's unlikely." We both chuckled as we hung up the phone. Mason seems to be drowning his days in job hunting and drinking. Thanks to him, I am now living a peaceful life with Noah. Interestingly, Noah was actually my colleague. Upon hearing about my divorce, he had eagerly pursued me. Though we started dating with only 6 months after my divorce, which made me somewhat hesitant, I was quickly drawn to his confident manner and kind personality. After getting married, Noah told me that he had always had a crush on me, and he was heartbroken when I got married. I laughed and apologized for not noticing his feelings sooner. Noah helps me around the house, a task I used to handle alone. Whenever we eat together, he always says how delicious the food is with a smile. It's these little things that make me incredibly happy, something I never expected. I was probably numb to it all, having grown up with old-fashioned parents. Now I am living a sparkling married life with Noah, who always delights in even the most ordinary things. I'm convinced that with him, I'll have a happy life all the way through our golden years, and so I was certain.
Please, go out with me on the premise of marrying me. Paul, whom I had met through a friend's introduction, asked me out on a date. He, who is 3 years younger than me, told me that he had fallen in love with me at first sight. Considering my age and the fact that I had been contemplating marriage, I decided to accept his offer. We eventually got married a year later. My name is Michelle. I'm 34 years old and I work for an international corporation. I've always dreamed of living abroad. My husband Paul, despite being younger, is a natural-born leader and can be described as the dominant one in our relationship. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he's the head of the household, but I didn't mind it. Having lived alone for a long time, I was accustomed to taking care of household chores, and I even enjoyed cooking. Paul rarely helped out, but I never found chores burdensome. On the other hand, Paul always took the lead when we went out together, allowing me to simply enjoy myself without having to worry about anything. This felt like a good balance between us. However, all of this started to change when my mother passed away. While I was at work, I received a call from my father informing me that my mother's chronic illness had worsened, and she had collapsed. I immediately boarded the train and arrived at the hospital in about 2 hours, where I bid a final farewell to my mother. I decided to stay with my father to prepare for my mother's funeral. When I contacted Paul, he said that he couldn't leave work at short notice. He ended up not coming to the wake. He did make it to the funeral, but it seemed that he hadn't made any preparations for mourning attire. I had to hastily arrange a rental outfit for him. He complained incessantly, saying that I should have prepared everything from the beginning. Between my sorrow and being busy, I didn't have the capacity to deal with Paul, so I let his complaints slide. But apparently, he didn't appreciate that, as he was in a foul mood throughout. Ever since then, it feels like our marital arguments have increased. Well, after being married for 3 years, I think it's normal to have some quarrels. But even so, Paul has been picking fights rather aggressively recently. With his persistent domineering attitude, he often dictated what I should do and take care of. I got fed up and even tried refusing a few times. But since he didn't know how things were organized inside the house, even simple tasks like preparing for his own business trips would take a long time. Moreover, he would complain while bustling around the house, making an even bigger mess. In the end, I realized it's easier if I just do it myself. I wasn't being completely obedient. I took care of certain things to save myself the trouble. Next week is the gathering for my mom's first death anniversary. I'm going to start preparing for us to join, okay? When I said that, Paul responded grumpily. I have an important meeting that day. What should I do? I've mentioned this gathering well in advance. How could he suddenly say something like that? What, you're not going? Paul responded with a heavy sigh. It's not that, but it'll be tough to delegate everything to my juniors, you know? He seems happy about his recent promotion and constantly talks to me about his junior team members at every opportunity. I felt like sighing right back at him. Please plan for it, okay? I emphasized. It was the day before my mother's first death anniversary gathering. When I got home from work, Paul was sulking and drinking beer in the living room. I'm sorry I'm late. I had to work overtime. I'm sure he's in a bad mood because I came home late, causing a delay in dinner preparation. I've been waiting here for an hour, just as I thought. But it's just 1 hour, isn't it? If he couldn't prepare his own dinner, he could have gone out to buy something. I did let him know what time I'd be home, so he could have taken some initiative and done things on his own. Suppressing the urge to say all that, I handed him a takeout box. I thought it'd take too long if I cooked, so I picked this up on my way home instead. In response, Paul slammed a glass filled with beer onto the table. Takeout again? Aren't you slacking off a bit too much lately? Again? The last time I brought home takeout was about 2 weeks ago. Sure, I've been busy lately, and maybe I haven't been cooking a feast every day. Nevertheless, I'm mindful of maintaining a balanced nutritional intake and rarely rely on prepackaged items. So I don't think I deserve that kind of criticism. As I was considering whether to retort or not, Paul, misunderstanding something, decided to pour salt in the wound. Can't say anything because it's true, huh? Do your chores properly. You've been coming home late lately, saying you're working overtime. You're probably just out having an affair, Paul shouted. His words sparked a flare of resentment that had been building in me. Enough is enough. If you know I'm working late, the least you can do is prepare dinner for us. It's fine if you can't cook. Picking up some takeout isn't too hard to do, is it? I always make sure to inform you when I'm going to be late, and even with the busyness, I take care of all our household chores. There's no need for that kind of tone. Paul gave me a glare. Huh? You're 3 years older than me, you know. I could have married a woman in her 20s, but I chose an older woman. Show some gratitude and do as I say. There's no one else who would want you, so you'd be in trouble if I were to leave you, wouldn't you? Did he really just say that? I was ticked off and couldn't hold back any longer. Then you should have married a younger woman. When we started dating and before we got married, didn't I ask if you were okay with me being older? You said it was okay, and that's why we got married. Even without you, I could have managed my life. Paul laughed mockingly at my words. Whatever. Let's get a divorce. With that, Paul took his beer and the takeout box and retreated to his room. We've had our share of arguments, but this was a first. I was done with him. I decided to eat my takeout dinner to calm my nerves. He must have been irritated because he was hungry. That's what I thought as I filled my stomach, but I couldn't settle down after all. I couldn't believe this was happening the day before my mother's first death anniversary. After some time had passed, I called out to Paul from outside his room. We need to leave by 8 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 7. There was no response, but I could sense that he was awake, so he must have heard me. With those words spoken, I went to sleep. The next morning when I woke up early, Paul was already gone. The bags I had prepared were still in the room. It didn't seem like he headed to the gathering without me. Where did he disappear? I called his cell, but there was no answer. There was no response to my texts either. Since there was no other choice, I left a voicemail message and started preparing to head out on my own. I got a hold of Paul while I was waiting for the train at the station. "I have to go to my meeting. I can't leave it to my juniors after all." When I answered the phone and heard only that, I panicked. Wait, what? Hold on! Despite my words, my voice was drowned out by the noise of the train, and the call ended. Overwhelmed by an indescribable mix of anger and resignation, I found myself in a state of stunned bewilderment. Before I could think further, the train arrived. Carrying unnecessary luggage for two, I boarded the train alone. When I arrived at my father's house, my father asked anxiously, "Where's Paul?" My father had been depressed since my mother's passing, and I didn't want to worry him further. I took a deep breath, managed to put on a smile, and said, "Sorry, he got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come here, but he recently got a promotion and it sounded like an important meeting, so I told him he should prioritize that." My father nodded, understanding the situation. "I see. He's working hard. It's a shame I couldn't see him, but your mother would understand. Tell him he's always welcome to visit." Those words stung a little, but I managed to keep up my smile. Throughout the day, there was no contact from Paul, and the night grew late without me reaching out to him either. I planned to stay the night and return home the next day. That was originally planned, so I didn't see an issue with not contacting Paul. Still, it felt like I was acting childish. Maybe I should cook him some hamburger tomorrow. His favorite dish. With that thought in mind, I went to sleep. The next day, I left my father's house and arrived at home around noon. I wanted to drop my bags off before going grocery shopping. I walked into our living room. As expected, Paul had left dirty laundry sitting around. I sighed at the thought that he still didn't know how to use the washing machine, and dumped the left-behind laundry in the washer with my own laundry. Taking a break and returning to the living room, I noticed something on the table. When I got closer, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were divorce papers, which he had already signed. Why? I stared at the divorce papers, bewildered. Is this his way of asking for a divorce? I pulled out my cell phone from my bag. It should be his lunch break around this time. I wasn't sure if Paul would pick up, but surprisingly, he did as soon as I called. "Paul? This divorce paper. What's this about?" On the other end of the line, Paul laughed. "What do you mean, what's this about? It's exactly as it looks. I don't need an older wife who isn't going to do household chores. That's why I decided I want a divorce. If I break up with you, I can even remarry a younger woman. At the end of the day, a wife is like a status symbol, right? I can't brag about you because you're older. It's quite challenging when my team members ask me about you, and evading the topic is no easy task." I was at a loss for words. I had nothing to say. If you don't want a divorce, then start doing your chores properly. I'm coming home as usual today, so don't forget to get some beer, alright? If you don't like that, take the divorce papers to the family court. It's up to you. With that, he hung up. The call ended without me getting a word in. I guess this is what it feels like to be too shocked to speak. Paul probably thought that if he said that, I would comply. I only did the chores because I didn't like to ask or beg him to do things. He must have thought all this time that I did it because I didn't want him to leave me. He must have thought I wouldn't stand up to him because he's the dominant one. Being married to a younger husband is sometimes envied, but really, there's nothing notable about it. I often found myself emphasizing the fact that my husband is younger. He's average in looks, average in personality, and earns an average income. There's nothing unique about him, so saying he's younger was just convenient. When we got married, I was worried about the age difference. But now we're both in our 30s, and he's only 3 years younger. If there was a decade or so between us, I might feel more affectionate. But it feels bad to be continuously called an older wife when we're practically the same age. I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the family court. When I submitted the divorce papers, I felt a sense of relief. I thought we were getting along fairly well, but that's over now. I can live without Paul. With that thought in mind, I felt a sudden sense of lightness, prompting me to contact my boss and request a few days of paid leave. Thankfully, the busy season at work had just ended, so he allowed me to take about a week off. Since I'm divorced now, I needed to sort out my belongings. I didn't have much stuff to begin with, so cleaning up was a breeze. I took the bigger items to a storage unit, packed my essentials and clothes in the car, and on a whim, I decided to head to a hot spring resort. It seemed to be the off-season for hotels, too, so I was able to book a stay at a cheap rate on the spot. I felt the excitement as I drove. As I enjoyed the hot springs and relaxed in my room, my phone rang. Michelle! I told you to get beer, didn't I? Where the hell are you? It's Paul's usual time to come home. I remembered hearing those words, and found it amusing. I'm at a hot spring resort right now. What? A hot spring resort? Why? What's going on? Didn't you say to file the divorce papers if I didn't agree with you? The flustered image of my ex-husband surfaced in my mind, and my laughter intensified. Hold on. Did you actually file it? Of course I did. Why? Why, you ask? It was your idea, Paul. Have you forgotten what you just said a few hours ago? Then I heard his clearly perturbed voice. Hey, you're joking, right? When you say hot spring resort, did you mean you went to some spa nearby? If that's the case, I'll pick up dinner, so just hurry back home. I couldn't stop laughing at the sudden, seemingly affectionate tone as he was proclaiming to be a caring husband. It was probably about an hour and a half of driving. There's even an outdoor natural hot spring. It's quite comfortable. I wonder if it will rain cats and dogs tomorrow since you're going out to buy your own dinner. I've already taken my belongings out so that you won't have to worry about me coming back. Please, take care of yourself. Paul was pleading desperately for me to return. But of course, I had no intention of going back. You're the one who prepared the divorce papers in the first place. Have you forgotten? It was blatantly obvious that you were using the threat of divorce to control me. I told you I could live without you. Now that you've divorced your older wife, you can go find a younger one. Whether you can or not, I don't know. Paul was completely silent. It might be none of my business, but you should probably consider moving out of that apartment too. Finally, Paul found his voice again. Why should I? His voice was barely a murmur. Think about your income. You'll go bankrupt soon if you keep living there. You can't clean, do laundry, cook. You'll have to use a housekeeping service and eat out, right? That costs money. It would be a problem if most of your salary went into rent. You thought you were the one providing for me, but my salary is actually almost double yours. You were never providing for me. If anything, it was the other way around. Also, you were acting all confident just because one junior came alone. But did you know that I have multiple juniors working under me, and even more juniors working under them? I don't usually talk about work because Paul gets moody, but I outranked him in both position and salary. You'd think he'd notice after living together, but it seemed like he was finding out for the first time. Perhaps Paul, being the dominant and proud man he is, kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that he can't look down on me, he must be feeling defeated. I've shattered his pride as payback for all these years. The reason I took care of household chores without complaining, even though you acted like a domineering husband at times, was partly because you were younger, and I cut you some slack. And partly because it was too much hassle to ask you for anything. It's not because I needed you to stay with me. I was just taking care of your needs while I was at it with my own chores. So when you said, do the chores or we divorce, of course I chose divorce. We're strangers now. Goodbye then. I said all I wanted to say and hung up. Feeling refreshed, I enjoyed the hotel's food. Afterwards, as expected, Paul reached out for reconciliation, but I told him with a smile, I'm older than you. I'm sure you don't want me back. Presumably, He wasn't successful with younger women. Eventually, Paul gave up and moved out of the apartment. I hired a lawyer for the division of assets, demanding more to compensate for the burden of household chores that had been imposed on me until now. Paul, being cheap, didn't hire a lawyer, and so I had the upper hand with my lawyer. We were able to reach an agreement with favorable conditions for me. By the way, it seems that Paul's only junior had been complaining to others about how poor his leadership was, to the point that he couldn't even consider him a boss. Paul overheard this, and they are currently in the midst of a dispute. He should have known how important it is to take care of your own junior. As for me, I had been offered a position at our overseas headquarters. I had been declining due to the current circumstances and out of consideration for Paul, but I finally decided to take on the opportunity. I'm currently preparing for my transition. I've been causing my father some worry, but we've started practicing video calls so we can keep in touch when I'm abroad. I am content because I'll be able to pursue the job that I have been dreaming of since I was a child. It's time to give it my all.
Is she running late again? As the start time loomed, I mused while gazing at the empty chair. My co-workers also looked frustrated. Eventually, the owner of that seat showed up about an hour after we had opened for business. My name is Casey. I'm a 48-year-old office worker. I live with my husband Scott and our 2 kids. My kids are in high school and middle school, so they're pretty independent now, allowing me to focus on my job. Scott recently started a business with some friends, and while it seems tough, he's happier than before. I've been working in accounting for quite some time at this small to mid-sized company and get along well with the part-time staff. However, I'm having issues with a newer employee named Frances. She's 24, half my age. The daughter of our managing director, she's clearly a product of nepotism. I didn't mind that initially. It's a small company, and these things happen. So when I heard that the managing director's daughter was joining the company, I just thought, oh, that's it. But Frances is a real piece of work. She was assigned to accounting after one of our part-timers left due to personal reasons. I was mostly handling things on my own, and I had heard Frances had some qualifications. So I thought maybe she would lighten my load. Turns out, I was wrong. I'm better off working alone. From our very first meeting, things felt off. When I greeted her, she said, "Sure, nice to meet you, Aunt." I was flabbergasted. Not only was her attention divided, but she also had the audacity to call me Aunt upon our first meeting. The managing director just watched it unfold with a smile, not seeming to mind. If my kids behaved like that, I'd tell them, "Don't be rude." Are things just different nowadays? I've never really liked our managing director personally. We only converse when necessary. I never knew he was so indulgent with his daughter. He probably thinks she can do no wrong. Confronting Frances would only upset him, so I held my tongue. Though I sighed inwardly, I have a duty to train her, so I went on to explain her the tasks. But Frances wouldn't listen.
"I can't remember all these things at once,"
she said, giving up even on listening. I restrained my irritation and asked her about her so-called qualifications. I thought you had some kind of certification. What is it? I thought maybe I could assign her work based on that. But her answer was,
"I'm an accounting clerk."
Apparently, she went to a vocational high school and got the certification almost involuntarily. She tried and failed multiple times to become an accounting technician, she told me. Is it really okay to have someone like that in accounting? I had my reservations, but I did my best to train her while focusing on my own work. A month after Frances joined, her attitude hadn't changed, and she still couldn't do her job properly. To be precise, I had taught her the same things repeatedly, but it seemed like she had no intention of remembering, as she didn't even take notes. Other staff members were also complaining that Frances wouldn't do the work they asked of her. What made it even more frustrating was that she was earning the same salary as me, despite my many years of service. Another month passed, and Frances had shown little to no improvement. One day, she didn't show up at the start time. I called her mobile, but it went unanswered. The managing director was out meeting clients and hadn't arrived at the office yet, so everyone was worried. An hour later, Frances finally showed up, acting as if nothing had happened. "What happened? Is everything okay?" I asked.
Oh, looks like I overslept.
"What kind of professional does that?" I told her. "If you're going to be late, you should at least inform the office." Frances gave a nonchalant
Okay.
in response. Everyone around us sighed in unison. From then on, Frances started being late more frequently. Though she supposedly lived with her family, she spent many nights out, something even the managing director was unaware of. There were times when she would be late even when the managing director was in, but all he would say was, "Oh, you're late today," leaving everyone else dumbfounded. The stress from dealing with Frances kept piling up in various ways, and then the incident happened. Is she late again? Even the managing director didn't know. She had spent another night out. Apparently, she stayed at her lover's place. The start time came and went, and she was nowhere to be found. I called her mobile again, but as expected, no answer.
At this point, should we just ignore her?
My colleague Dina said, clearly frustrated. Finally, Frances arrived, more than an hour late. She sat down at her desk without a greeting and started putting on makeup as if nothing had happened. Everyone was stunned, but she didn't seem to care. I finally had to say something. "Frances, this really isn't okay." She looked at me puzzled. "They don't seem to know what's wrong. You come in late, no greeting, and you start doing your makeup?" Just then, I saw the managing director returning to his desk. But I continued. "I've told you before to call if you're going to be late, remember?" It felt ridiculous having to say this to a 24-year-old adult. It was like scolding a child. Frances just sulked, acting, indeed, like a child. The last thing I said was, "Isn't it common courtesy to apologize when you're late?" The managing director stormed over to me, his face twisted in anger. He yelled at me. "You insolent brat! Who do you think you are? You're fired!" I almost blurted out, "What?" but held my tongue. Nervous glances spread through the room. Of course, the president is conveniently absent. Well, the president's not really reliable to begin with. Frustrated with the managing director's tirade, my colleague Dina spoke up. "Wait a minute. Casey hasn't said anything wrong here." Dina works in sales and hates injustices. She has a strong sense of right and wrong. We've been good friends for a long time, and we help each other out at work. Everyone else in the room nodded at Dina's words, but not the managing director. He yelled at Dina. "You're talking back to me? You're fired too!" I couldn't take it anymore and glared at the managing director. "Are you serious about this?" Dina was glaring at him too. He declared both of us fired and told us to leave immediately. At that moment, the president returned, but did nothing but look puzzled. Apparently, the president and the managing director are relatives, and for some reason, the president can't oppose him. Fed up, Dina and I packed up and left. We stopped by a cafe on the way to catch our breath. What's his problem? I was getting tired of the job, but I didn't think I'd have to quit like this, Dina said, still fuming. Indeed, we had started to think about quitting the company ever since Francis arrived. I feel bad that you got fired because of me. That was my biggest concern. Had I not spoken out, Dina wouldn't have been fired. Dina reassured me. It's okay. I was tired of working full-time anyway. Maybe this is a chance to find a part-time job. What about you, Casey? I've actually been offered a part-time accounting position at Scott's company. Dina thought that sounded like a better option. Both the managing director and Francis really ticked me off. Dina was still angry, and I agreed with her. I wonder if the company will be all right without us. Not that it's any of our business. I said that, and Dina finally smiled. Exactly. Even if they beg us to come back, I won't. I feel like suing them for wrongful termination. We decided to take some time to cool off and discuss what to do next. When I got home and told Scott about what happened, he was even angrier than I was. What? What's up with that managing director? I was furious too, and unsure about whether I'd made the right decision. But Scott's reaction confirmed that I wasn't in the wrong. Scott's words were comforting, and I finally felt at ease. I then started working in accounting at Scott's company. The part-time accountants who were already there told me they felt more at ease now, as their workload had lightened. Dina too started working for Scott's company, though not full-time like before, but part-time. Since we were fired on the spot and had to pack up immediately, we hadn't been able to do the paperwork for leaving the company. Someone, probably my successor Francis, would take care of it. We started working energetically in our new environment. After some time had passed, I received a call from the managing director of my previous company. We don't understand the accounting you were handling. Come to the office immediately. What's he talking about? Could it be they're failing at the monthly payments to clients and sales calculations that I used to handle? Besides, we haven't even received our exit paperwork yet, but we were fired just for being late. Who do they think they're talking to? Needless to say, I declined. No can do. But the managing director was relentless. Come right now and we'll rehire you. You haven't found another job yet, have you? I sighed. No thanks. I've already switched jobs. I've taught Frances everything about accounting. Not sure if she gets it though. I hung up after saying that. Apparently, Dina also got contacted. There were several clients who said they'd stop doing business if Dina wasn't handling their accounts. The managing director arrogantly offered her re-employment as well. He had underestimated Dina, thinking she was just a female salesperson and wasn't capable of handling work. It turned out she was a valuable employee. This fueled our anger towards the managing director once again. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing, with calls from the previous company reaching over 100 in just a few days. Even when I answered the phone thinking that I had completed the necessary documents for my resignation, I was simply told to come quickly because they would rehire me from above. We had had enough. Frustrated, Dina and I decided to go to the previous company and give them a piece of our minds. Upon seeing us, the managing director said, "Ah, you finally came back. You should have returned obediently from the start." We hadn't returned to the company. We were there to confront him. I said with a smile, You should have no problems if Frances is handling the accounting, right? I taught her everything. If she can't do it, that's on her. You, as both a parent and a boss, are failing if you haven't even noticed her poor behavior." The managing director's face turned red with anger. "How dare you! I even offered to rehire you." I calmly responded, "That's precisely why we don't want to be rehired. In fact, we were considering quitting anyway." He looked utterly shocked. "What?" I went on. "Has Frances started acting like a responsible adult yet? While I don't deny nepotism, at least have her work properly. The way she talks, the attitude when she listens, everything about her is unprofessional. Shouldn't you, as her parent, be the one to address these issues? And you fire us just because we pointed that out? It doesn't make sense. To be honest, I couldn't care less about being fired. It was clear things would go south if Frances was the only one left in accounting." The managing director glared at me. "Plus, firing Dina, who's a stellar salesperson, shows you really don't know what you're doing. No wonder you're losing clients. How many have you lost in the last month?" I say with a grin, and the managing director's face turns beet red. "I came here today to talk about our wrongful termination. We need you to provide the necessary documents. Also, I wanted to see firsthand how much trouble you're in without us." Dina chimes in after me. "I've already consulted a lawyer about the wrongful termination. We're willing to consider a settlement if it spares us all the hassle. What will it be?" The managing director bursts out. "What wrongful termination?" "I was fired on the spot for bringing up issues with an employee's behavior. This is clearly wrongful termination," I say assertively, locking eyes with the visibly pale president. "President, this is your company, isn't it? Your relationship with the managing director has nothing to do with us. Getting more than 100 phone calls is crazy, don't you think? You fire us, and now you want us back because you're in a jam? Who do you think would even listen to that?" The president only manages to look paler, unable to say a word. "Mr. President, you've done accounting work before, right? I trust you'll handle the rest." Dina and I decide there's no point in further discussion and turn to leave. We'll leave the rest to our lawyer. With that, we leave the company. After some time, we received a request for a settlement through a lawyer, and we agreed. We were recognized as victims of wrongful termination, and we got our unpaid wages, severance pay, and a settlement amount higher than the market rate. We were pleased. It felt like we had finally had our revenge on the company. Both Dina and I would sometimes get urgent calls from clients while we were out, as we had given them our personal numbers. After we abruptly left, some even called to check up on us. I told them the situation and that we had been wrongfully terminated. Word spread quickly in our tight-knit industry. Most of Dina's clients left once she quit, probably cutting the company's business in half. According to a former colleague, staff kept leaving the company. They were getting complaints from clients, and the president and managing director were overwhelmed trying to keep things running. Frances couldn't manage, so the wife of the former accounting president had to step in. She's a very stern person, and Frances was having a hard time, crying every day. 6 months later, the company apparently went bankrupt. It might be a good thing they lasted half a year. One day I saw someone who looked like the managing director at a supermarket near the station. I couldn't help but stare. There he was, dressed in the supermarket's uniform, getting yelled at by a young man who seemed to be the store manager. Looks like he's working part-time at the supermarket because he couldn't find another job. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of the once haughty managing director getting scolded by someone younger. Our eyes met from a distance, and I gave him a nod, which he, of course, ignored. But I frequent that supermarket, so every time I go, I look for the managing director, who's usually getting yelled at for something. I thought he was competent, but later learned from Dina that he just took credit for his subordinate's work. By the way, when I told Dina about the supermarket, she started going there out of curiosity and became a regular customer. In a way, the managing director is contributing to the supermarket's revenue, so maybe he's competent after all. But he's always getting yelled at. Dina and I continue to work happily at Scott's company. Scott even said he's relieved because our work has increased the company's sales. We're both looking forward to Scott treating us to dinner for our upcoming birthdays.
You getting pregnant at your age? It's just revolting. And let's not even talk about your educational background. It's like you're the subject of a documentary or something. Who drops out these days? Do you really think my being a high school dropout and an older mom affects you as my brother's wife, Ava? You're shameless, you know that? Can you just leave before I have to call security? I'm sure you don't want to ruin your darling brother's wedding. Ava, the bride, bursts into laughter as if she's won the argument. My brother Daniel, witnessing her intimidating demeanor, signals me silently to leave with a smile. Fed up with both of them, I finally say, "Fine, just don't regret this later." What? You're such a sore loser, you old hag. Don't think you can take those words back later. My name is Sophia. I'm 38 years old. Currently, I'm 6 months pregnant with my first child. Today is the wedding of my only brother Daniel. Ava, the new bride, has just thrown some unbelievable words my way and shoved me toward the door of the family waiting room. I did get married last year, at the age of 37, considered late by most standards. However, until then, I never had the time to focus on personal milestones like marriage or having a child. I have a brother Daniel who's exactly 10 years younger than me. When he was born, our father was 42. Our mother was 35. During a time when societal bias against late pregnancies was much stronger. My mom always said, "We were both only children, so we wanted to give our kid a sibling." Dad passed away from injuries sustained in the accident when I was 17 and my brother was just 7. Mom also underwent multiple surgeries, but eventually 2 years later, she joined Dad. At the time of Dad's passing, I was a sophomore in an all-girls school with a ladder system. Financially, we were okay for a while, thanks to the insurance money, but my mom was hospitalized and couldn't take care of my brother. Even worse, family members, once warm and supportive, started eyeing the compensation money. One even told my bedridden mom, "You can't take care of your young kids. We'll become their guardians until they're adults." So I sold our family home and moved to a new apartment, relying more on non-family members to help us through this crisis. Ironically, they proved more helpful than my own flesh and blood. Having moved, I was free from the clutches of money-hungry relatives and focused on taking care of the home and Daniel. Between cleaning, cooking, and attending to my still very needy brother, not to mention frequent hospital visits to see Mom, my schooling took a backseat, and I eventually dropped out. Certainly, I had help from my teacher, classmates, and best friends, but as months turned into years, the burden grew heavier on me. So I decided to drop out of school during my sophomore year. "Sophia, do you really have to quit? Why not just take a break?" My best friend Emma tried to talk me out of it, but I didn't want to leave things hanging. I decided to make my little brother Daniel my top priority, at least until he starts middle school. Around that time, our mom, who had been struggling with treatment, finally passed away, joining Dad. For the next 5 years, life revolved around Daniel. Taking Emma's advice not to isolate myself at home, I continued learning while Daniel was at school, enrolling in language courses and other online certifications. When Daniel moved on to middle school, I became a certified public accountant. I started working through a temp agency. I continued to aim higher in my career, and by the age of 25, I got a job at the headquarters of a well-known restaurant chain. There were people from all walks of life, and they inspired me to work harder than ever. Despite the detours, I found a place where I could be myself, and all my efforts felt worth it. Eventually, I got married. On the other side, Daniel moved out for college and started living in a dorm. About 6 months ago, he texted me out of the blue. "Hey, I have someone I want you to meet. Can we catch up?" Of course, I had no reason to say no. That weekend, we met at a restaurant Daniel had picked, where he introduced me to a tall and beautiful woman. Her name is Ava. She was a graduate from Wellesley College with excellent grades. But something about Ava didn't sit right with me, especially her tone and perspective. For example, right after introductions, she bluntly said, "No offense, but how old are you? You look significantly older than Daniel." "I'm 38. There's a 10-year gap between us, so that might be noticeable," I replied. "So, you're almost 40 then? Wow, and you just got married. How old is your husband? Was it a marriage of convenience? I mean, if we get married and have kids, they'd probably call you grandma rather than aunt, right?" I was already suspicious of being pregnant and was planning to see a doctor next week, so her insensitive comments made me even more uncomfortable. Yet Daniel, standing right next to us, didn't seem bothered at all. It looked like my brother, who had always been focused on studies and work, was completely smitten with Ava. He was blindly approving of everything she did. That night, when I asked, "Hey, Daniel, you're dating Ava with the intention of marrying her, right?" "Yeah, that's the plan. Sophia has met her too, and I was thinking of visiting Ava's family to introduce myself next week." "Already? Didn't you say you've only been together for exactly 2 months?" "Is that so? Is there a problem?" "It's not necessarily a problem, but isn't it better to get to know each other a little more before making such a big move?" "Thanks for worrying, Sophia, but the bond between us doesn't depend on time. It's deep and solid," Daniel declared. I couldn't find the words to respond. Daniel officially proposed to Ava, and they were happily engaged. But then Daniel told me, "Look, Sophia, Ava's family has some opinions. So could you and your husband kindly not attend the engagement party?" "What do you mean by Ava's family's opinions?" I blurted out. And Ava, who seemed to have been eavesdropping, took the phone. "I heard from Daniel that you're pregnant, Sophia." "Yes, but my morning sickness isn't bad, so attending the engagement ceremony should be—" "But don't you think an old, pregnant woman would ruin the celebration?" She cut me off. "You should know your place. Pay for the engagement and stay out of it. You really don't have common sense, do you?" Stunned, I couldn't respond. Daniel rushed in. "Sophia, just transfer the money for the engagement to my account and don't cause a scene, all right?" Then he hung up. Soon after, I received a reminder text from Daniel. "When are you sending the money for the engagement, Sophia?" "Why should I pay for your engagement, Daniel? I raised you like a parent, but I am your sister, not your mom." Daniel explained that Ava's family owned several restaurants. Ava had grown up like a little princess, surrounded by other wealthy folks. Naturally, Ava is surrounded by many acquaintances, friends, and relatives who are also celebrities. And she says, "I can't match Sophia's level." That's what they say. He said I wasn't in their league and even hinted my lack of education was a problem for their marriage. "If I convinced them you should just wish me happiness and keep your mouth shut," he said. Fed up, I thought, if that's the case, consider this my final contribution, and transferred the requested $100,000. On the wedding day, my husband and I visited the venue with mixed feelings. Ava greeted us with, "It's really gross that an old woman like you is pregnant. Leave before I call security." My husband started to say something, but I stopped him. Ava continued, "You two aren't even considered family. We should have told the staff to exclude you. Today's guests are only work associates, college, and high school friends. Ava laughed, and Daniel just smiled. No matter that it was a joyful occasion for my brother, I had no reason to put up with this level of insult. Fine, I'll leave since I'm clearly not wanted here. And while I'm at it, consider any future interaction with you all permanently canceled. No regrets, okay? As I said this, Ava laughed and retorted, Why would we regret it? Are you lost in your fantasies or something? Before her laughter even faded, Ava's father rushed over. Ava, what are you doing, raising your voice like this? People can hear you from the other side. Oh, Dad, meet Daniel's embarrassingly uneducated, incompetent sister-in-law. She had the nerve to try to attend the ceremony, so I just chased her away. As Ava laughed and said this, her father looked at me, his eyes widening halfway. Ava, do you know who this is? She runs the staffing agency that practically supplies all the staff for my restaurant. Hospitality staff? What's that? Ava's father then explained that hospitality staff refers to temporary workers employed during busy periods in hotels and restaurants. Their responsibilities range from preparations to serving food and drinks at appropriate times and cleaning up afterwards. Especially for Ava's father's restaurants and Japanese cuisine establishments within hotels, where banquets and receptions are held, my agency provides invaluable staff, trained in both manners and language skills. So what? I didn't know, okay? My apologies, Miss Sophia, CEO. It seems there's been a little misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? No, there's no misunderstanding. Ava calling me an uneducated old hag isn't a first. And you both agreed to not invite me to the engagement party, right? So you're just as judgmental as your daughter. Oh, well, that's... My husband, standing beside me, stepped forward and spoke. What's the rest of that sentence? Regardless, we'll both be withdrawing our businesses from any involvement with your company. The father's face turned ashen. Mr. Alexander, CEO, you're Miss Sophia's husband? My wife uses her maiden name in business, so you probably didn't notice. And it's not something we'd go around announcing. An angered Ava, overhearing this, shouted, Why are you humbling yourself before the husband of this old hag, Dad? We can always work with another company. The father explained that my husband owns the consulting firm he had approached. Ava was undeterred. So what? There are plenty of consultants out there. We should cut ties with these idiots. His face remained pale. As your daughter suggests, it seems like a win-win for both parties to go our separate ways. My husband took my hand, and we started walking away, leaving behind a dazed father, a confused Daniel, and a furious Ava. The wedding proceeded without a hitch, but afterwards a heated argument erupted between father and daughter, all because of Ava's attitude towards us. As it turned out, the father, a restaurateur, had been facing severe financial strains. The main bank had introduced him to Alexander, intending to hire him as a consultant to turn things around. But upon investigation, the father's financials were far worse than initially thought. So it's a good thing we didn't take on a potentially futile project, my husband later commented. But the bank was furious, withdrawing support and freezing loans. Rumors spread, leading to other financial institutions and suppliers doing the same, plunging the father into bankruptcy. So Ava's father set his sights on Daniel's apartment, aware that it was just a drop in the ocean. When I got married, I sold my family's apartment and settled the remaining insurance and compensation money from my parents. Daniel used his half as a down payment to buy a high-rise apartment. However, the apartment still had 30 years left on the mortgage, which would leave Daniel in considerable debt if sold. Thus, the relationship between Daniel, who resisted selling, and Ava, who pushed for it, rapidly deteriorated. In the end, it seems they agreed on a quick divorce, with Daniel paying some amount as a settlement. Daniel came into my office to tearfully explain the situation, but I was so disgusted that I asked him to leave immediately and banned him from returning. Of course, he is also banned from my apartment, and I've blocked all means of contact. Right now, I'm busy preparing for the birth of my child. Emma, Alexander's sister, and a friend since my student days, often visits and says, "My niece or nephew can't wait to meet the baby," as she talks to my growing belly. From now on, I plan to work even harder to make my own family happy.
Man, being a housewife must be great. You can nap whenever, and you've got meals provided every day. If I could be reborn, I'd want to be a woman. Totally. Just like Mom, right? She's like a parasite. Ah, you're spot on. As I washed the dishes, my husband and son laughed and chatted like this behind me. So who do they think made the dinner they're enjoying? And who does the laundry? My name is Marcia. I live with my husband Cedric and our college-aged son Davin. Every day, it seems, they label me a parasite, gossiping behind my back. Yes, currently I am unemployed and a housewife. However, there's a reason I became a housewife. Before marrying Cedric, I was an active professional, working hard in the corporate world. On the other hand, Cedric's job required frequent transfers and business trips, so he asked me to be a stay-at-home wife. I loved my job, but I quit to be with him. Becoming a housewife was the only option. His transfers always took us away from my parents' home. Raising a child in unfamiliar places was challenging, but still, we were a happy family. About 10 years after our wedding, when our son started elementary school, Cedric said, "The days of transfers are over. We'll be living near my parents' house now." Near your parents' house? Surprise came before joy. Yes, I requested to be stationed near home. It'll be easier for you and Davin, right? It will be, but... Settling in one place was indeed a relief, but the truth was hard for me to fully embrace. From the start of our marriage, my in-laws had never really approved of me. A wife should prioritize her husband after marriage. "We took you as our daughter-in-law, so you should serve us." Every time they opened their mouths, that's what I'd hear. Settled down, but now constantly summoned by in-laws. Get this, handle all the chores. They exploit me just because I'm a housewife. After enduring this for several months, my patience was at its limit. My in-laws treated me like a slave, and my husband wouldn't intervene. I grew to despise even seeing their faces and considered starting a part-time job. But then, while my in-laws were traveling, they got into an accident. While the other party was unharmed, my in-laws required care due to their injuries. Yet even in such circumstances, Cedric's nonchalant attitude remained unchanged. "Marcia, you're a housewife. You can look after my parents at home, can't you?" "What? What are you talking about?" Confused by my husband's words, I replied, "You want me to care for your parents? All by myself?" "What's the problem? Davin's in elementary school now. My parents said they want to be home. Housewives just lounge around all day, so you should naturally do this." "I've never done caregiving before, and handling both of them at once is..." "Stop making excuses. Who do you think has let you lead such a lazy life as a housewife up to now?" "Lounge around all day? Lazy? Remember, you wanted me to be a housewife. That's why I quit my job. I've been handling everything at home. How self-centered can you be?" If it weren't for our son, I would have surely filed for divorce. His words were that unbearable. In the end, I took up the task of caring for my in-laws. Though their bodies were frail, their minds were sharp. They took out their everyday frustrations on me. "Marcia, coffee. You really are an inconsiderate wife." "Oh, okay, right away." After one sip of the coffee I made, father-in-law abruptly threw the cup at me. "Who drinks coffee this lukewarm?" "Ah!" "You can't even make a decent cup of coffee, can you?" It wasn't just father-in-law who's overbearing. Mother-in-law was equally impossible to deal with. "Hey, Marcia, isn't the shower ready? I feel all sticky and gross." "Just a moment, please." "Never mind, just wipe my back quickly. I can't reach." "Like this? Ouch!" "Oh, I'm sorry." "You're so rough. Our son is unlucky to have such an incompetent wife." Naturally, talking to my husband didn't help. Instead, he'd casually say, "You're the wife. It's only natural to serve my parents." Caring for my in-laws became so routine that I began to feel numb. It was hard, but somehow my feelings became dulled. No matter how much they belittled me or threw things, I kept telling myself it would end someday. Just need to be patient until then. That's how I got through each day. Years later, due to the onset of dementia, the need for care for my in-laws increased, and it was decided they would be admitted to a care facility. The weight on my shoulders, having spent most of my days caring for them, had noticeably lessened. However, over these years, my husband and in-laws had consistently looked down on me, and unfortunately this attitude rubbed off on our son, Davin. Today, as always, Davin mocked me. "Mom, just because you're not taking care of Grandpa and Grandma anymore doesn't mean you get to slack off. I can't believe you're living off Dad's earnings and doing nothing." "Davin, well said," my husband chimed in, supporting our son's words. "I've been fed up with your thick-skinned attitude for a while now. And by the way, when did you gain weight? Probably because you're eating full meals now that you're not caregiving." I noticed that too, but didn't have the heart to say it. The two of them openly insulted me. If I tried to leave the room, they'd just insult me louder so I could hear. Living this way daily, my stress had reached its breaking point. And then an incident pushed me past my limits. While I was doing the dishes after dinner, my husband and son started their usual chatter. "Being a housewife must be nice. Napping any time and getting 3 meals a day. If I were to be reborn, I'd want to be a woman. Right? Mom's basically what you'd call a freeloader." "Exactly." "I swear if I ever get married, I don't want a freeloading wife like Mom." At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. "Freeloader? Are you kidding me? Who do you think cooked the dinner you just ate? Who's doing these dishes? Who washes the clothes you wear and cleans the house you live in?" I'll never forgive them. They've pushed me to this point, and I'll make sure they regret it. Determined to get my revenge, I began job hunting the next day. I didn't want to waste another moment on them, so I decided to work for my own future. Luckily, I quickly found a job that matched my qualifications. I used to be a nurse. I have a nursing license and plenty of experience, so finding a job was easy. Cedric should know I was a nurse. Did he not realize that with my qualifications I can easily find work? That evening, while my husband and son were having their usual conversation, I informed them, "I've decided to start working from tomorrow." They first looked at me in shock, then snorted in laughter. "What are you talking about? Who would hire a housewife like you?" "Exactly. No place would hire somebody as outdated as you, Mom." "It's just part-time for a few hours, isn't it? What a waste of time. Just drop it." "Mom, you can only do household chores. You should listen to what Dad says." Looking down on the two, I firmly replied, "It's a full-time, permanent position, actually." "What, full-time? Permanent? You got—" "Mom, they hired you as a permanent employee?" "Yes, so from now on, I'll be contributing half to our living expenses. In return, I'd like you to share the household chores." "What? Housework is your job." "That's right. That's what moms are supposed to do." Facing their outbursts, I landed the finishing blow. "Oh, since when was housework a job? I've never received a paycheck. I thought being a housewife meant napping whenever and living leisurely." "What?" They grumbled endlessly, but I ignored it. The next day, I started working again. I only did the basic chores and dedicated the rest of my time to my job that I love. It was challenging after such a long break, but far more fulfilling than before. Ever since my husband and son started excessively praising me to get in my good graces. "Cooking is tough. Wow, Marcia, you're incredible. I miss your cooking." "Totally. No one can do laundry and cook like Mom. The best we can do is take out the trash." Thinking I'd be like, "Oh, well, all right then." I glanced at them and flatly said, "Excuse me, I'm working too, you know. How about doing your laundry and preparing your meals?" "What? How dare you speak to me like that? We can't live without my income." "Excuse me? That's not true at all." "What?" Turns out my salary is almost the same as my husband's. In fact, since I work at a large hospital, I earn slightly more. Speechless, my husband became more docile. But now my recently employed son tried to exploit the situation. "Hey, since you're earning too, I don't need to chip in, right?" With my husband nodding in agreement, he added, Right, actually. Let's just have Marcia pay for everything. You were the one who said we can live without my money. Great idea, Dad. More allowance for us. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Tired of their childish banter, I said, all right then, both of you will handle all the chores and manage the finances within what I contribute. Why would it come to that? You're still a housewife. Dad's right. We're already doing our laundry. I might be a housewife, but first I'm a person. I'm not your maid. You! It was because of me that you even got to work. Exactly. All this time you've been relying on Dad, now you act so high and mighty. Then my husband slowly pulled out divorce papers from his bag. He slammed them on the table in front of me. I stared at the papers and asked quietly, "What's this?" You can't see, can't you? Divorce papers. I've filled in my part. We can get divorced whenever. Got it? So, you want a divorce? I didn't say that. You don't want to divorce me either, do you? I'll give you 1 day to think, cool down, and decide what's best for you. Okay. As I began to pack my things, I could see my husband and son smirking. Hey, where do you think you're going? I turned and answered, I'll stay at a business hotel near work for a while. Fine, cool off there for a bit. And so I headed to the business hotel. I didn't have any intention of going back to that house. After checking in, I went directly to work from the hotel the next day. This continued for a few days. One evening, while relaxing with a drink, I got a call from my husband. Marcia, have you decided? Davin's here too. Come home and cook dinner. I've made up my mind, but I won't be coming back. What? What are you talking about? Your son and husband are hungry and waiting. Can't you even care for your family? We're not family anymore. He seemed unable to comprehend and uttered a dumbfounded, What? Thanks for the divorce papers. I've already submitted them. What did you say? You filed for divorce? This is a joke, right? A joke? Who would joke about something like this? We're now complete strangers. What are you saying? You're acting so selfish. What about Davin? He's about to graduate from college. He'll be fine on his own. He's already secured a job. You're abandoning your family? Goodbye. Hey, wait a... I hung up. The calls from him kept coming. I got fed up and blocked his number. I told my parents about the situation and asked them not to answer his calls. Seeing this opportunity, I decided to move back to my parents. Luckily, there was a branch of my workplace near my parents' home. I asked my boss and managed to transfer there. Now I rent a condo near my workplace and parents' home, and I'm working full-time, just like before. Being a full-time nurse is always busy. Having my workplace nearby is super convenient. On my days off, I visit my parents and spend more time with them. Marcia, you're always welcome to come over. You've been pushing through all this while. Thanks, Dad, Mom. Dad and Mom said, comforting me. On the other hand, my ex-husband and son, unable to keep up with the daily chores, their house has now reportedly become a complete mess. A week after I left, I received a message on WhatsApp from my son. Mom, we can't handle it without you. We can't bear living like this anymore. Dad and I are at our wits' end. Please help us, Mom. The picture my son sent was truly appalling. A mountain of empty takeout containers indicating they haven't been cooking. Garbage bags scattered everywhere, alongside piles of laundry, floors accumulating thick layers of dust, and so on. The dirtiness was incomparable to before. I simply replied to my son, I hope you find your parasite soon. That message must have struck a nerve, as I haven't heard from him since. I have no regrets now. I did all I could, and made every possible effort to maintain the family relationship. But if they're going to look down on me that much, I'd rather distance myself from such a family. Going forward in life, I want to indulge myself. Having held back for so long, I'm determined to live a happy life.
William, you consider me family, right? You said I was the only one you could rely on and even handed me the bills, remember? Oh, that. Just acting. I lied because I wanted you to pay. Figured you'd do anything if I called you family. William, my stepson, smirks as he says this to me, who came to visit him in the hospital. Ignoring my shock, Emily, his wife, laughs at me as if I'm a fool. So, you paid for the surgery and now you think you're some kind of hero? Don't flatter yourself. You really think that makes you family? It's clear. They don't consider me family. That alone is enough to make me feel down. But William throws more heartless words at me. You're not needed. You can go home now. I paid for the surgery, got no thanks, and now I learned that calling me family was just a trick to get me to pay. Emily's words, William's dismissal, it's all enough to turn my sadness into anger. I don't need to be family with people like this. Unaware of my growing anger, William waves me away. Don't ever show your face again. You're a stranger to us. We have no plans to interact with you ever again. Fine by me. I'll gladly cut ties with you. Great, that's what I want. Enjoy your lonely life then. I feel foolish for ever wanting to be family with these people. I regret being deceived and paying for the surgery, but I decide to consider it severance pay. If being family means being with people like you, I'm better off alone. Goodbye. I say this and leave the hospital room. My name is Laura. I married Owen, a single father, in my late 30s. I used to live a life without much social interaction, but Owen taught me the joy of connecting with people. Therefore, when Owen asked me to marry him, I thought it would be okay if it was with this person. I thought that, even though we weren't related by blood, I could be a real family with William, Owen's son. But it wasn't that easy. Living together, I quickly learned how hard it is to close the gap with someone who won't open up. I had never raised a child. And William was a sensitive teenager when I moved in. I didn't know how to connect with him, and our relationship didn't improve. His answers to my questions were always short. Ah, yeah, whatever. Sometimes he'd even say, "Don't worry about it," curtly dismissing me. At that time, my priority was William, and I was desperate to deepen our relationship. I was trying myself down, rushing things. The person who eased my mind was none other than Owen. I sometimes wonder if I'm being a good father too. Really? One evening after dinner, William quickly retreated to his room. When I expressed my concerns, Owen responded like this. Unable to hide my surprise, Owen gave a light laugh. To be honest, ever since William was born, I've never felt like a perfect father. But I've never been good at socializing, so even before worrying about being a mother, I don't know if I'm communicating well. Laura, just be yourself. There's no point in rushing. If you force it, it's not a real family. My husband is right. Forcing a relationship isn't the same as building real trust. So, let's take our time becoming a family. William is going through adolescence. It's a tough time. He'll get frustrated, but someday he'll understand. Yes, you're right. Thank you. My husband's words melt away the pressure that had been weighing on my heart. From that day on, I stopped trying to force a closer relationship with William. I noticed he was slightly more talkative when Owen was around, so I chose those moments to engage him. I think it led to more meaningful responses, but we never really got close. Eventually, William went off to college and never returned home. He would occasionally visit Owen, but never contacted me. He would tell Owen when he was coming, so I would prepare a feast and look forward to his return. But that joy didn't last long. Once William became financially independent, he began to scorn me, acting all high and mighty while living off that money. The first time I heard those words, I thought I must have misheard. I never thought William would say something like that. He had never been honest with me, but sadly, I hadn't misheard. Every time he came home, he belittled me when Owen wasn't around. This continued even after he got married. His wife Emily even joined in. Guess you could only get a guy with kids, huh? How sad for someone so unattractive. Like William, Emily looked down on me when Owen wasn't around. In Owen's presence, she would only talk to him and William, treating me as if I didn't exist. I was already struggling with my relationship with my stepson, and now my daughter-in-law was treating me horribly. I was deeply depressed. But I couldn't talk to Owen about it. He was nearing 70 and battling lung cancer. I didn't want to add to his worries. Despite his fight, Owen passed away at 72. The words William directed at me in my deep sorrow were easy to despair over. Now that Dad's gone, you and I are strangers. He told me this matter-of-factly right after Owen's funeral, when the exhaustion of the past few days hit me all at once. Emily, standing next to him, said nothing but gave me a cold look. I can't believe, I managed to say, but received no reply from either of them. It's been a year since. I've had no contact with William and Emily. Having learned the warmth of being with people, I was stuck in a dark place, unable to move on from the loss of my husband and the shocking words from my stepson. Then one day, I looked at my phone after leaving it unattended for a few hours and saw a flood of missed calls. The caller was William. Seeing dozens of missed calls from my son, who hadn't contacted me in a year, I panicked and called him back. Hello, Mom. I've been diagnosed with lung cancer and need surgery. What? Hearing the same diagnosis as Owen, I was stunned. William's voice was weak, stirring my anxiety. When I found out I had cancer, I didn't know what to do, and then I thought of you, Mom. This coming from William, who had always despised me, was unexpected. He must have felt vulnerable. I quickly thought of the most reassuring thing to say. Don't worry, medical treatments are advancing. And you're only 35, you're young and strong. Trust your doctors and focus on getting better. Okay, thank you, Mom. I felt a guilty sense of happiness that my son, who had always rejected me, was now relying on me in his time of need. And for the first time, William said, "Thank you," warming my heart. Emily is there for you, but if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll visit you in the hospital. Let me know your room number. A few days later, I headed to the hospital room William had told me about. It was a private room, spacious and likely expensive. How are you feeling? Thanks for coming, Mom. I was in pain right after the surgery, but I'm okay now. Though he looked tired, William smiled at me. After a brief chat about his condition, the conversation shifted to the room. I can't sleep well around strangers, so I chose a private room, but the cheaper ones were all taken. So you ended up in this big room, but at least you can rest. Yeah, but it's more expensive than I thought. Saying this, William handed me the bill. It listed surgery and hospitalization costs, along with the room charge, totaling over $10,000. William and Emily, who's a housewife, don't have much savings. Already physically drained, William looked emotionally strained as well, tearfully asking for my help. Mom, I'm sorry for calling you a stranger before, but now you're the only one I can ask. Can you pay this bill for me? You're the only family I have left. I understand. I'll take care of the bill on my way out, so stop worrying and focus on resting. I had been wondering how I could help ever since I got the call, so I immediately agreed to William's shaky request. Really? Of course, you're my precious son, and you've been through a lot. Let me do this for you. I said this and paid the bill at the reception desk before heading home. I visited William again the next day, but my hope for another heartfelt conversation was quickly shattered. Strangers are not allowed in here. As I entered the room, Emily, who had arrived before me, yelled this at me. From yesterday's interaction, I thought William considered me family. Surely, William will stand up for me. That's what I thought. But William, lying in bed, showed no sign of intervening. Growing impatient, I couldn't help but ask William. William, you consider me family, don't you? You said I was the only one you could ask for help and even gave me the bill, right? Ah, that, just an act. I lied because I wanted you to pay. I thought if I called you family, you'd do anything for me. William twisted his mouth into a distasteful grin as he answered. So, you think you're a lifesaver just because you paid for the surgery? Don't flatter yourself. That doesn't make you family. I realized I was still not considered family. That alone was enough to make me feel down. But William threw more heartless words at me. You're not needed. You can go home now. Not receiving any thanks for covering the surgery costs, being told that calling me family was just a trick to get me to pay, and now hearing you're not needed from my son, all of this turned my sadness into anger. I don't need to be family with people like this. Unaware of my anger, William waved me away. You don't have to show your face ever again. You're a stranger to me. I have no plans to interact with you for the rest of my life. Fine. If that's how you feel, I'll gladly cut ties with you. Great, that's what I want. Enjoy your lonely life then. I felt indifferent about my desperate attempts to become family with these people. I regretted being fooled and paying for the surgery, but I decided to consider it severance money. If being family with people like you is my alternative, I'd rather be alone. Goodbye. I left the hospital room. Despite cutting ties with my son and his wife, my heart felt lighter and more refreshed than it had in years. Then, a few days later, William called again. Come to the hospital now. Even over the phone, I could tell William was extremely irritated. You're the one who said never to show my face again, remember? Shut up. This is all your fault. They said I could finally be discharged, but then they gave me another bill. Why didn't you pay the full amount? Apparently, William had no money and couldn't pay the bill. He thought he didn't have to pay anything because I had covered all the costs. I paid everything that was on the bill you gave me. I don't see why you're complaining. Then why do I have to be billed again? An angry William continued to complain loudly. It seems he chose the expensive private room thinking I would cover the costs. You said you'd pay for me once. Keep your promise. He insisted he shouldn't have to pay. I decided to give him a reality check. I agreed to pay for the bill you gave me. I never said I'd cover any future bills. Huh? He seemed not to understand, his voice tinged with anger. I explained so even William could understand. Hospitals usually bill at the end of the month. You were hospitalized at the end of the month, so the bill you gave me was for last month. The new bill is for this month. I never heard that. They probably explained it when they gave you last month's bill. You likely ignored it, thinking it didn't concern you. What? Did you know the bill wasn't the full amount? Why didn't you tell me? I was planning to pay for your discharge fees too, but I can't see myself paying for someone who isn't even family. Then come to the hospital right now and settle the bill. If you do, I'll consider you family. At William's words, I let out a deep sigh. How can someone asking for a favor act so arrogant? I was beyond angry. I was dumbfounded. I already told you, I'd rather be alone than be family with someone like you. Even after my firm refusal, William persisted. Are you sure? If you're not family with me, you'll be truly alone. No one will want to deal with an old person like you, and you can't even support yourself. What are you talking about? I've been working all along. Don't lie. You've been at home all the time. You've always relied on Dad's money, and you're still living off his inheritance. I was at home because I work from home. I'm a writer, you know. What? For a moment, William was speechless, but he quickly yelled, That's a lie. I've never seen you work. That's because I always stopped working to spend time with you, to become a family, but it was all in vain. So, you're really a writer? But you're probably not a successful one. I've never heard of any writer with your name. I publish under a pen name. Success is subjective, but I've certainly earned more than Owen. What? Faced with the reality, William was at a loss for words. After a long silence, I said, Are we done here? And was about to hang up. Then I heard William say, Wait! I was wrong. I always thought you married Dad for his money. I didn't know you were earning your own. That's good. The misunderstanding is cleared up. Goodbye. Wait! You're my lifesaver and my family. You can even live with me, so please help me. Who was it that called me a stranger and kicked me out of the hospital room? That was... I couldn't make out what William was mumbling, but I didn't need to hear it. You're the one who said never show your face again, and I have no plans to interact with you for the rest of my life, right? I'm fine on my own, so you should rely on someone else who's unrelated to you. With that, I hung up. I ignored all subsequent calls from William and blocked his number. Afterward, William withdrew almost all of his savings to pay the remaining bills. He needed ongoing chemotherapy to prevent cancer recurrence, and it seemed his finances were getting worse. Emily lost her patience with him when the money ran out and apparently had an affair. Now he is in debt due to a divorce settlement. William is too busy with work and hospital visits to take care of himself, so in exchange for not demanding compensation, Emily takes care of household chores. Both are constantly irritated in a life without love or money, and it seems people are gradually disappearing from their lives. It's a fitting outcome for two people who easily called someone they considered family a stranger. As for me, I had been writing dark works since my husband passed away. But this experience inspired me to write a powerful new piece that's been well received by both editors and readers. I've regained the sense of purpose that I lost when my husband died. I plan to continue producing works that meet my readers' expectations.
What are you even doing here? A male coworker spat those words at me. He seemed to be under a huge misunderstanding and was generally avoided by others in the office. But I tried to argue, but he cut me off. Yeah, save your excuses. You're just in the way, he dismissed me. He clearly didn't understand his position. Would he keep misunderstanding like this forever? My name is Amy. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. My father is the president of this company, having built up the company inherited from my grandfather. I work at his company, and although I'm based at the head office, we also have 3 subsidiaries. My father is a kind-hearted man, even going as far as to hire those struggling to find work. Those he hired this way often show gratitude by working hard and becoming valuable assets to the team. The reason we don't have extensive recruitment is because my father conducts interviews personally, one-on-one. After realizing that employees causing issues were often those he hadn't interviewed, he made it a point never to skip the president's interview, no matter how busy he got. Yet, even among these, there are people who misunderstand. One such person is Kevin, the son of a subsidiary president, and he is the worst. According to my father, he was previously employed elsewhere, but it seems his company went bankrupt and he lost his job. When the subsidiary president shared with my father that his son was struggling to find work, my father decided to interview him and ended up hiring him. At the time, they were short-staffed due to a recent resignation, and despite his interview performance, my father hired him due to the urgent need and the president's pleas. Then, complaints started emerging from that subsidiary, and word of these issues eventually reached me, who oversees talent development. Amy, have you heard? The president's son messed up another order. Hearing this, I finally brought the issue to my father. When I told him about the troubles Kevin was causing, my father asked me to go to the subsidiary and give him some guidance for a while. I hesitated, not expecting to be the one to go, but reluctantly agreed. And it was decided that I would be sent to the subsidiary. Starting from the next week, I began my stint at the subsidiary. So, I'd heard rumors, but I met Kevin, the president's son of our subsidiary, for the first time. I was here primarily to guide him, but officially I was in charge of everyone's training. Kevin was the same age as me. Because he was the son of a subsidiary's president, he seemed to carry some weight in the company. He reportedly respected his elders but looked down on his younger seniors and those of his own age. From his perspective, I was a woman of his age. There was no chance he'd listen to my guidance. But I knew I had to find a way, and it was racking my brain. The president of the subsidiary had introduced me to everyone as an instructor from the main office. Kevin gave me a glance. He probably didn't even conceive that he was in a position to be guided. From then on, I tried to engage with Kevin as much as possible, aiming to gradually establish a conducive environment for guidance. But of course, it wasn't easy. He made it quite clear he didn't enjoy talking to me, and we could hardly have a proper conversation. After I continued to approach him, he mocked, "What? You're into me or something?" I was upset, but I held my anger. Then he added, laughing, "You're just trying to get on my good side because I'm the president's son, right? Can't blame you. You're a part-timer." Little does he know, I'm the daughter of the president of the parent company. If anything, he should be the one trying to win me over. I cursed him silently and somehow managed to let it slide. The subsidiary president knows I'm the president's daughter, but he's been asked to keep it quiet. Fortunately, our last name is common, so nobody raises an eyebrow even though it's the same as the parent company president's. After that, Kevin continued to bug me. "Why are you here anyway? Don't bother with excuses. You're just a nuisance." Even though I explained why I was here, Kevin didn't seem to understand his position at all. The next day, I happened upon Kevin making an order. He wasn't following the established rules. When placing an order, please always get approval from your supervisor. I caught him before he hit the order button, so he clicked his tongue in response. "This is so simple. We don't need to get approved." But it's a rule to prevent mistakes. Our argument continued. Kevin wouldn't listen. But knowing he made several ordering mistakes, my tone naturally hardened. "Weren't there some errors with your orders recently? I was wondering why they kept happening, and now it seems clear." At my words, Kevin's mood soured visibly. I continued. "I'm here to help eliminate such small mistakes, so let's start making improvements right away. I'll make everyone aware, so you, Kevin, should take the lead in preventing errors." Now that I'd identified the cause of the ongoing ordering errors, I was confident they could be eliminated if everyone checked in the same way. However, Kevin, the subject of the warning, frowned. "Do you find it fun to single me out? Feel superior pointing out the president's son? You're such a ridiculous woman." What? I was so surprised I let out the sigh I'd been holding back. This man didn't pride himself on being competent at his work, he prided himself on being the president's son. That was ridiculous. I'd been addressing him formally all this time, and I didn't like how he spoke to me casually as if it were expected. But should I point it out? Does he not realize unless someone tells him? I thought about saying something, but I decided there was no point in picking a fight here, so for now, During break time that day, I was having lunch in the staff cafeteria when Kevin showed up. Hey, part-timers aren't allowed in here, you know. Scram. It seemed like he specifically sought me out to tell me this. Is that so? I played dumb, to which he scoffed. Obviously, it's a staff cafeteria. There's no way part-timers would be allowed in here. You'd realize that if you thought about it a bit. There's no such rule in our company. Part-timers are an important part of our workforce, and there shouldn't be any discrimination in treatment between them and full-time or contract employees. On top of that, I'm not even a part-timer, so why does he keep misunderstanding? Even though I tried to tell him I wasn't a part-timer, Kevin just sighed heavily and left. What a mood killer. This must have been how he's been treating part-timers all along. This probably explains why we've had such a high turnover rate with our part-timers recently. I'm starting to see the issues with the subsidiary. I'll have to compile these issues and submit them to the president of the subsidiary. As I was thinking about the future, the next day was unusually hectic at the subsidiary. Apparently, one of our business partners had not received their shipment. They were furious, and their president was on his way to our office. Just our luck, the president of our subsidiary was on a business trip. Kevin, who's in charge of the business partner, was expected to handle the situation, but I had a bad feeling about it. Before long, the president of the business partner arrived. Kevin was in charge of handling the situation, but he wasn't showing any remorse for his obvious mistake, which enraged the president. I couldn't just stand by and watch, so I bowed my head and went to greet the president. But Kevin shouted at me, "Aren't you just a part-timer? Get out of here! I don't care if you're some kind of educator from headquarters. Don't get above your station!" Even the president was taken aback, and the room fell silent. Taking advantage of the situation, Kevin dragged me out and said to the president, "This situation is all because of her from headquarters." He then turned to me and said, "This mess is all your fault. Fix it, starting with an apology. Go on, apologize," and he shoved me hard in the back. I stumbled forward and ended up kneeling, as if I was bowing down to the floor. What's worse, Kevin kicked me and said, "I said apologize," again. At that moment, the president of the business partner extended a hand to help me up, so I took his hand and stood up. Then I said to Kevin, "I'm not a part-timer. I'm an instructor from headquarters. What are you misunderstanding?" Kevin just stared at me and said, "Huh?" The next person to speak was the president of the business partner. "You're Amy, right?" This business partner originally had dealings with our headquarters, and through that connection, they started doing business with our subsidiary. The president of the business partner, Alex. He was my senior in college, and he took over his father's business when his father passed away a few years ago. Alex used to visit our headquarters, and since we attended the same university, we used to chat whenever we ran into each other. I hadn't seen him in a while, but I thought it would be quicker for me to deal with him when I learned that Alex was the one coming today. But I didn't expect this to happen when I went out to meet him. Kevin, who didn't know any of this, was dumbfounded. Hey, what's going on?" I ignored Kevin and explained the situation regarding the deal to Alex. Fortunately, I had already understood the situation before Alex arrived, and the item was in stock at our headquarters, so I was arranging for it to be delivered from there. The response from our headquarters was a bit late, and Alex arrived before it could get there, but just as he did, the headquarters called back saying they would immediately ship them to Alex's company. Alex thanked me, relieved, but I felt guilty. It was hard to apologize enough given the attitude of Kevin, the person in charge. Then Alex's anger turned towards Kevin. "You! This is too rude, don't you think? What's the matter with you?" Kevin, stumbling over his words, said, "I'm the son of the company president. I thought I had to protect this company. She's from headquarters. She doesn't know anything about us and she butts in." Alex stared at Kevin. "So you're the notorious troublemaker, the son of the subsidiary's president. Nothing you did looked like protecting the company, and do you know who she is?" Then finally, Kevin looked up at Alex and me. "She's an excellent employee from the headquarters, and she's also the daughter of the president." Hearing this, Kevin turned pale instantly. "The president's daughter?" As he looked at me, I took out my employee ID. "You might not remember because you weren't interested, but my last name is the same as the president's, right? I guess you never thought I could be his daughter since it's a common name. My current position isn't as the president's daughter, but as an instructor. I came here because there were complaints about your behavior." Kevin's face got paler and paler. "As expected, you were doing whatever you wanted, flaunting the fact that you're the son of the subsidiary president. You can't do the work and don't have the skills. You don't listen to your seniors or superiors. But your attitude, that's big. I saw with my own eyes how terrible you are. My coming here was your last chance, but you didn't take it. And you even did such a thing in front of a client." I had no intention of forgetting what Kevin had said to me or the fact that he had kicked me. Alex also said, "I've seen everything. I'll be a witness." Kevin turned pale as a sheet. "No, that's not it. I mean, it's not what you think." He tried to make excuses, but there was nothing he could say. I glared at Kevin and said, "I have no intention of forgiving you and everything you said to the other employees and temps. I'll report it all to headquarters, to the president of the subsidiary, your father. I'll report everything. We'll contact you later about your punishment." Then I went to explain to the other employees. After that, I returned to the headquarters and reported the incident to my father. He regretted having hired Kevin on impulse, even though he had interviewed him. Later, the president of the subsidiary, Kevin's father, was also called to the headquarters, and we discussed how to handle the situation. As a result, Kevin's salary was reduced because he had caused damage to the company. He complained about it, but his father told him to resign if he didn't like it. Kevin's father didn't know that his son was doing such terrible things. Kevin hid his true nature where his father could see, and his father trusted Kevin, taking his word for it, which only encouraged his behavior. A few days later, on my way home from the company, I was ambushed by Kevin. As soon as he saw me, he grabbed my arm and said, "This is all your fault." Ouch, let go. Even though I cried out, he wasn't going to release me. I was working late and no other employee was around because our going home times didn't overlap. Preparing myself for a punch, I resisted, and then I heard a voice. "What are you doing?" It was Alex. He twisted Kevin's hand to save me. Kevin, furious, screamed at me, "Everyone's laughing at me because of you. What are you going to do about it?" I tried to object, but my voice trembled too much to utter a word. Alex then loudly responded, "You've brought this upon yourself. Before blaming others, look at your own behavior. If you had been more responsible, you wouldn't have become the laughingstock." I couldn't hold back and blurted that out, which caused Kevin to attempt to punch me. But just then, the police arrived. A passerby seemed to have reported the incident. Relieved, I collapsed right where I was. My arm, where Kevin had grabbed me, was red. Kevin was taken away by the police, and I thanked Alex. I asked, "Why were you here?" And he told me that he had been worried about me ever since our recent reunion. When he had contacted my father and found out I was still at work, he decided to drop by and ask me out for dinner. Come to think of it, Alex and I had not exchanged contact information. Alex took my still trembling hand and said, "But today, I will take you home. Can I ask you for dinner sometime?" I could feel my cheeks reddening as I nodded. Later on, I decided to sue Kevin. However, I accepted a settlement when Kevin's father pleaded with me. In the end, Kevin and his father resigned from the company and left town. I received the settlement money. Kevin's family apparently moved to his father's rural hometown, but they seemed to be having a hard time, given the cold stares from the locals. Kevin's father apologized to me once, but for me, it's all in the past now. As for me, after the incident, I began dating Alex, and we're now preparing for marriage. My father seems happy, but he's worried whether I will have to quit my job when I get married. I love my work, and I also want to build a happy home. Whether I continue working at my father's company or quit to help out Alex's company, I haven't decided yet. But whatever I choose, I believe I will be happy, because after all, I will be with the person I love.